Imagine standing shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, holding a sign high above your head, your voice echoing in unison with others demanding justice, when suddenly a cloud of burning gas fills the air. Your eyes water, your throat seizes up, and you can't breathe. You stumble, coughing, while uniformed men in camouflage march toward you with shields and helmets. Now imagine you're not just any protester in that moment. You're a sitting mayor, an elected leader, a candidate for Congress. That is exactly what happened outside an Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in suburban Chicago on Friday morning, when Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss says federal agents tear-gassed him during a small demonstration. What unfolded in Broadview, Illinois, is a shocking collision between local political leadership, federal enforcement, and a deeply polarizing immigration agenda. It was still early in the morning when a modest crowd of demonstrators gathered outside the Broadview ICE facility. The location, a low-slung complex ringed with fencing topped by barbed wire, has become a symbolic flashpoint for immigration enforcement in the Chicago area. The mood among the protesters was tense but nonviolent. People held handmade signs with phrases like, "Families belong together," and "Stop the raids." Some filmed on their cell phones, aiming their cameras at the entrance where government vans often arrive to transfer detainees. They knew they might face a heavy law enforcement presence, but many of them, including Mayor Biss, felt it was their responsibility to stand in the way of what they saw as unjust policies. Biss himself stood near the front line, dressed not in a suit and tie but in casual clothing, a sign of solidarity with the activists he had come to join. He later said in a video posted online, "I'm back at the Broadview IC facility where I was part of a protest just a few minutes ago." His voice trembled as he spoke directly into the camera, still shaken by what had just transpired. Not only did they come with weapons and violence, show of force and drive a van into us, but then they tear-gassed us, and I have to tell you, it was terrifying. He paused, catching his breath before continuing. It was impossible to breathe, and really, really scary. But the point is, they are trying to intimidate us, to stop us from standing up and being a part of a nonviolent resistance, and we will not be intimidated. According to video captured by WBBM, CNN's local affiliate in Chicago, federal law enforcement agents wearing camouflage uniforms, helmets, sunglasses, and full face coverings confronted the protesters as they gathered near the entrance. At least one woman was shoved to the ground, her body crumpling on the pavement as others gasped and rushed to her aid. Shouts rang out, "Stay back! Don't push her!" But within moments, the agents deployed tear gas into the crowd. Plumes of acrid smoke filled the air. Protesters staggered backward, clutching their faces, their signs fluttering to the ground. The scene, which started as a peaceful demonstration, suddenly looked like something out of a war zone. One protester who was filming described the moment later, saying, "It was like they didn't care who we were. They didn't care that the mayor was standing right there. They just unleashed on us." In the footage, Biss himself can be seen recoiling, covering his face, and then stepping away as others scatter. His decision to be there was not a coincidence. Evanston, the city he leads, is a progressive stronghold about 15 miles north of downtown Chicago and home to Northwestern University. Many of his constituents are outspoken in their opposition to federal immigration crackdowns, especially after reports circulated earlier this month that a large-scale enforcement campaign will soon be underway. That campaign is tied to the sweeping immigration agenda pushed by President Donald Trump in his second term, an agenda that polls show most Americans oppose, but that continues to animate his base. The Department of Homeland Security wasted no time in firing back at the narrative coming from Biss and his fellow demonstrators. On Friday morning, the agency's official account on X, formerly Twitter, posted a sharp rebuttal. Sharing a clip from news coverage of the Chicago protest, DHS wrote, "Desperate politicians want their 15 minutes of fame and they're willing to do it off the backs of our law enforcement. They are putting them at further risk to get on TV just to get a viral tweet. It's pretty despicable." To federal officials, the demonstration was nothing more than a stunt designed to generate headlines. To those in the crowd, however, it was an act of civil disobedience met with unnecessary aggression. Eyewitnesses describe a surreal scene as the morning unfolded. Demonstrators who had come expecting to chant and hold signs found themselves rubbing milk on their eyes and coughing uncontrollably on the side of the road. The smell of the tear gas lingered, clinging to their clothes and hair. A handful of protesters remained determined, standing with their signs held high even as the smoke cleared. They pressed their phones against the fence to capture images of the barbed wire glinting in the sunlight, evidence of the government's hardline stance against those who dared to oppose its policies. One activist shouted through a megaphone, her voice hoarse but steady, "We will not be silenced. We will not back down." The handful of voices that remained were defiant, if smaller in number. For Biss, the confrontation was more than just a chaotic morning. It was a defining political moment. As a Democrat now running for Congress, his presence at the Broadview protest was both symbolic and strategic. He positioned himself as a champion of nonviolent resistance, someone willing to endure the same risks as ordinary citizens in order to stand against what he framed as injustice. His words carried weight not only because of his office but also because of the raw authenticity of his delivery. "They are trying to intimidate us," he said, "and we will not be intimidated." It was the kind of soundbite that resonates deeply with progressive voters, particularly in districts where opposition to federal immigration enforcement runs high. Meanwhile, the protests did not end with the tear gas. By midday Friday, new video from WBBM showed demonstrators regrouping outside the facility, a handful of them holding up their phones toward the barbed wire fence as a visible statement of surveillance and accountability. The number of protesters may have been small, but their determination was unshaken. Organizers announced plans to continue the demonstrations through the evening, ensuring that the story would not fade quietly into the background. Their persistence reflected a larger national movement, ordinary citizens pushing back against what they view as draconian policies, even in the face of physical danger. To understand why Broadview became a target for protests, one must look at its symbolic significance. The facility, though modest in size, is one of the key detention centers in the Chicago area. For years, it has been the first stop for immigrants facing deportation, a place where families have been separated, and where advocates say due process often falls short. News that a new wave of large-scale raids might originate from Broadview ignited anger across progressive communities in Illinois. For activists, showing up at the gates was about more than just opposing one policy. It was about making a stand against an entire system they believe is unjust. Inside the protest, small but powerful moments of human connection played out amid the chaos. When the woman was shoved to the ground, several strangers rushed to lift her back up, shielding her body from further harm. One young man shared his water bottle with Biss, who was still coughing from the effects of the gas. Another demonstrator wrapped an arm around a friend and whispered, "We're okay. We're okay. Just breathe." These moments reminded everyone present that the protest at its core was about humanity, about standing together against fear. The broader political context loomed large. President Trump's second term has been defined, in part, by his aggressive immigration agenda. Campaign promises of strict enforcement and large-scale deportations have translated into real-world policies, and facilities like Broadview are on the front lines of carrying them out. Supporters argue that these measures protect national security and uphold the rule of law. Critics counter that they tear families apart, violate human rights, and fuel xenophobia. The clash outside Broadview was not just about one morning or one mayor. It was about these competing visions for the future of America. As the day wore on, questions remained unanswered. Why did federal agents choose to escalate so quickly against a small group of demonstrators? Was the use of tear gas justified? And what message does it send when a sitting mayor is subjected to the same force as ordinary protesters? CNN reached out to both Biss's office and ICE for comment, but as of Friday, no detailed explanation had been given. What is clear, however, is that the incident has already entered the political conversation in Illinois. For supporters of Biss, it underscored his courage and commitment. For his opponents, it may raise questions about judgment and political theater. What happened in Broadview may not have involved thousands of demonstrators or hours of clashes, but its significance lies in the intersection of power, protest, and politics. A mayor running for Congress found himself coughing in a cloud of gas, standing on the same pavement as activists half his age, facing down the same armored agents. It was a moment of shared vulnerability but also of shared defiance. And as the sun set over the small city west of Chicago, the barbed wire still gleamed, the facility still stood, and the protests showed no sign of fading. The confrontation may be over for now, but the battle over immigration and the role of those who resist it has only just begun.